When looking at lumber, the basic theory behind being more sustainable, more green, is you want to use smaller diameter, faster growing species. And you don't want to be cutting down any more old growth than absolutely necessary. So the bias, therefore, is towards things like OSB and engineered lumber. Okay, there's also some question about treatment processes when you get to PT too, but let's start with the OSB versus plywood. OSB is considered greener than plywood because it's made from either chipped, recycled material, faster growing species, etc. So you get green points for that. There's no particular increase in cost depending on the day of the week, plywood versus OSB. So you get the points there and you don't have to increase your cost. Radiant barrier sheathing actually is cost effective if you do the numbers. You have to convince your home buyer that it matters, but that you get good points for that, and it's a relatively small adder to the cost of the home. So whether or not you're able to get any additional dollars out of the customer, I guess right now is open to question, but there's a good value there. You have to use certified lumber, as we discussed a moment ago. And keep in mind, you want to be careful about your certification requirements, because it could delay your project. You could have a point where it's not, FSC lumber is simply not available for 3 days. I mean, it's been circumstances like that. We've done some FSC projects, and you end up buying truckloads ahead because you can't, you could be standing around without the 2x4s you need. Another piece of this is dimensional lumber versus engineered. Engineered lumber, obviously, is a amalgamation in one way or another of smaller lumbers, different species, etc. So you get green points for that. Now there is, depending on what you do, there is a cost adder. Obviously, if you're using GLBs instead of dimensional for headers or something, you're paying a bit of a premium. But if you're substituting perhaps GLBs for 4x12s or stuff, you'll get points for that. Maybe your adder isn't quite so onerous. So depending on what you do there. iLevel's our primary supplier. iLevel's got a lot of green content in what they do. They'll support you. If you need to go to a jurisdiction to make the case, they'll do that. As you move down, I-joists in particular are considered a very green product. It's for the reasons we talked about. It's basically an OSB I-beam. So you're getting the benefit of replacing dimensional lumber and using a not quite a recycled product, but something that's perceived as being a recycled or recyclable product. Now there's engineering advantages to I-joists as well, and most of you are probably familiar with that. I had some samples brought in here to show what you can do with I-joists. Apparently they got put in a different room, so we'll make do. But most of you are familiar with I-joists, I'm assuming. So it's a much superior material, and depending on how you lay it out, there's not necessarily a significant cost adder for that. On your floor decking as well, using T&G and OSB will get you green points instead of using the plywood, and it both performs just fine. There's been some question about moisture and like that from some folks about the OSB. We've not experienced it in Weyerhaeuser stands behind it. So if you have an issue with moisture on a job site on an OSB that's supplied by Weyerhaeuser, they will remediate the situation, because they are adamant it's not an issue. It's one of the reasons we work with it, because they will stand behind it. Treat itself. As you probably all know, we've made the migration from arsenic treated to copper treated sill. Okay, now copper treated sill is the process is not particularly environmentally friendly process, and it's a very caustic treatment. So code requires that if you're using copper PT sill, all thread, all anchor bolts, all fasteners of all kinds need to be hot tip. Okay? Not even EG, it's got to be hot tip. If you put an untreated fastener into the copper PT, within a year, you will be down to next to no diameter in that fastener. So you need, if you're not doing that, you need to be aware of it and to change your practice, because it's a significant liability issue out there for you. In addition, any hold downs, for example, that would touch the plate would need to be the Z-Max hold down. So you're paying a significant premium on your additional items working with the copper PT. So the greener option is an engineered LSL sill. It's engineered and treated with a zinc borate process. It's a pretty benign process, and you can use standard fasteners, standard embedded items, standard hold downs, etc. So when you do the math between those two, the LSL is no longer that much of an adder. Normally it's about 3 or 4 times the cost. You get down to 1.5 times if you're doing your math on your other items. So you can go green there, pick up some performance benefits to yourself, and lessen your liability. So it's kind of a win-win. The final item on materials, caulks, sealants, and adhesives are available in low VOC, so you don't have a significant outgassing of solvent. In the caulks and sealants, we found that works fine. We use Henkel products. They have a whole line of green stuff. Pretty much everybody does. The one area to look at, though, is on the subfloor adhesive. Got to be careful. Because you don't have the solvent, it can take up to 24 hours to cure. So you don't get the same continuous bead of adhesive. It tends to kind of pond. Now, we haven't noticed a significant performance degradation, but just be aware that that is an open issue on that. So, make your own judgment call. But so none of those are really sold at much of a premium. So again, you can go green on that at a relatively low cost. Brenda's got some examples of some of these green products here. If you could come here just for a second. The eye joists, as I said, most of you have already seen what an eye joist look like. There's one item here in particular that this is an example of the engineered LSL, and a lot of you have probably seen this as well. That's fine here. One thing to think about, there's a slight increase in cost, but you get an energy savings and you'll get better performance, is there are sill gaskets available at a relatively inexpensive cost, which is what you see here. It's 3/8" closed cell foam with a bitch-a-thing top. This will fit between the bottom plate of the wall and the slab, or the raised foundation, either way. So you'll get a much better seal. Most folks are running a couple of beads of caulk when they think to do it. But you'll get more performance and you get green points for this as well. So that's something to think about. One of the areas that's important in green building is waste. Okay, as most of you work with truss guys, you know when you're in an automated factory situation, you can optimize the lumber used, so you'll have much less waste. On a job site, you'll anywhere from 15 to 22% of the lumber that goes to the job site is wasted. It ends up getting in a dumpster and being sent out to the landfill. If you're using engineered subcomponents like panels and trusses and things of that sort, you will have very little job site waste, and you'll have as little as 3% waste in the factory. Now you'll get significant green points from jurisdictions for that. The much less waste. You'll cut your dumpster on your drops on a given house anywhere from, if you have three dumpsters in a house, you'll cut it down to 1 perhaps, maybe 1.5. So it's a big deal for jurisdictions. The waste is something people understand. A lot of this stuff, the green official, they don't understand materials, they don't understand a lot of this stuff. But waste they can see and they understand. So this is an area where you can get some advantage. If you're working with a good panel producer, whomever it is, we obviously suggest you don't work with us, but whomever it is, they're going to optimize in the factory. So you're going to experience much less waste throughout the whole process. That happens to be our line. Yeah, as I was saying, on the waste, if you're using engineered materials, roof trusses, panels, by using that, you're going green as well, because you have much less impact on the job site, much less impact on the neighborhood, and much less negative reaction both by the jurisdiction and by the neighbors. As I said, you'll reduce your waste anywhere from $300 to $600 a house, depending on what you pay for your drops. You're going to put it together much faster, so your impact both on the neighborhood, on numbers of trips to the site. Now as the greenhouse regulations start occurring, they're going to start counting trips to site. Okay, so be aware of that. Even your guys in their pickups, you're going to start counting those as part of the global warming calculation. So it's much faster going together. You can typically cut half your assembly time, your framing time, using components. So you're impacting less on the site, and you have fewer drops, fewer trips. It allows you to go green at a lower cost, again, because of optimization and some of the things that you can do in panels that are harder to do on site. it's hard to control materials usage on site through your framer, whereas if you're using an environment where it's a manufacturing environment, you can control materials usage much more closely. The better sealed building envelope comes from making choices like this, and good insulation on the rest. We've talked about that under energy. It's important. Some of the standards in Europe are migrating this way. The standard in Scandinavia for a home is 0 air penetration at a 50-mile-an-hour wind. Okay. Depending on what your city or county chooses to do to you, that's a significantly difficult standard to meet. Now, it's possible, and there's ways to do it, but you need to be thinking about it from the get-go, from design all the way through. Again, you have fewer shipments to the site, lower impact. I don't know how much infill work's going on here, but in a lot of locations on the infill, the tipping point for the jurisdiction in terms of buying into the project is the fact that you can impact the neighbors much, much less than you can in a longer build and more lumber drops, more carpenters on site. So that all comes down to a lower neighborhood impact. So that's going green and the cost of it, and what does it mean? Now the question that we all have to look at is, do our customers actually value this? I mean, is it something that you can market it and you put a green cross on your house? Do you get Energy Star rated? Do you get PATH certified? All these things. Our experience is that the customer does value it, but won't pay for it. Probably the same within your experience. In different jurisdictions, it's actually demanded. You will have a green house, but I'm not willing to pay more than the house across the city line that isn't. Marin County, California, for example, is one of the jurisdictions where if you're not green, you're going to have trouble selling your house. Even more trouble now. But even a year ago, you had to be green to sell your home there. So, it's up to all of us to make our cost-benefit calculation and what we think we can do in terms of premium, in terms of how we appear to our customers. And it's been surprising in that some of the builders selling relatively inexpensive homes in the Central Valley in California have big green programs with major brochures, and you wouldn't have thought in such a tight cost environment that they could continue to do that, but they've done it and found success. So if you're green and the guy across the street isn't, you have a marketing advantage. And if you do it right, you won't experience much in the way of increased cost, at least depending on what they're forcing down your throat in terms of the regs. So one last thing I will do is exhort you to work with BANN, get standards we can live with. I just can't stress that firmly enough, because we operate in some environments where they have a commercial leads checklist that they kind of bastardized and put into an ordinance. And trying to live with it is very difficult. So now, we help and we do what we can with that. But you hear what I have to say. And you're going to hear more about it here in a minute. But I would encourage you strongly to support that effort. Are there any questions at this point I can answer for anyone? Okay. Well, there's our website there. If my direct line is on there, any questions that come up between now and whenever, feel free to call and ask, and happy to work on this with you. Thank you.